Hey there, and welcome to another webinar on how you can improve your interview techniques, and as you're transitioning from one job that you've left, looking for another step into your career. And today is a really great topic, which I'm asked increasingly about given the environment that we're in, which is how to ace your online job interview. And interviewing is a considerable skill, as we've talked about in past webinars, and having that as an online experience has even further wrinkles. So I'm looking forward to talking to you today about things, and just a little bit of homework, just a little bit about me as well, and that is that I'm the founder and director of Career over 1,000 people over the last, and when you're going through the program, you'll see a lot of me being the talking head. So that's a little bit about me. Today, what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you can, just let me know through the chat, which is on your panel. If you can hear me loud and clear, just let me know that, and I look forward to taking your questions. But I would appreciate if what we can do is we can take your questions at the end of today's presentation. Okay, let me get into the presentation now. And so this is all about acing an online job interview. And as I said, job interviews are hard enough, it's showtime, but nowadays the increasing propensity of people to be interviewed through Zoom, through Teams, through Skype, business Skype and the like, and this creates a whole lot of different wrinkles, which we're going to talk about today. So today's webinar is all about giving you a handful of classic techniques and some tips that are unique to the work from home era that can help you land that next job. Working from home is WFH, and you'll see that a little bit later on in the presentation as well. So we're in for a good time, being able to make sure that what we're able to do is to give you some practical tips about how I'm seeing some things. It may be part one of several webinars we'll be doing around this particular topic. We're facing every country on the planet, and every city on the planet is nervous, anxious, potentially in lockdown and the like. And restricted movements. And for our Victorian participants who are on this or watching later, you know more than anything else about your current situation. As at August, you're in stage 4 lockdowns. Even if you wanted to get out, you can't. And anybody in this current COVID environment really is restricted, not having a face-to-face type interaction, Zoom, Skype, and anything else. And online means just that extra layer of in-person, impersonal interaction. I've been coaching people for 6 odd years using this type of medium, and I'm still getting it right and still getting it wrong. It's hard, or it's harder, and it's not as real as getting face-to-face with somebody. So what's expected now is that companies will even are recorded, they're actually talking to camera. It may be engaging through a phone call with a talent acquisition manager or a recruiter. But by and large, it's about developing rapport and you selling yourself through this particular type of medium. Okay. So I'm hearing that the connection's not all that great today. Maybe what I could do is I could just, can I just get a thumbs up? Just admin thumbs up. Can you still hear me okay? Can you get a thumbs up for me? Just, yep, I've got somebody here. I've got Gail, Barry, Jim, Sarah, others. Can you just give me a thumbs up to let me know that you can hear me okay? Yep, I'm getting okay. I'm going to push on here. I'm sorry about that, just in case that was the, so let me just see here. Jason, thanks so much. Yep, perfect. Okay, so let's just continue on. So what is expected now is that you're going to be developing a rapport through this type of medium. And what I was saying is it's not easy. I do find these things challenging. So, let's push on and find out what you would be expected to do. And some of these things are going to be some traditional tips, and then some of them are going to be clearly related to this online medium. The first thing I've got here is researching the company and your interviewer. It would be expected that before you have an interview with the talent acquisition manager or the recruiter or your hiring manager, the person you're going to be reporting to, is that you know all about the company. And what's really important is, particularly as you're going to be invited to have a Zoom meeting or a team meeting or whatever it is with your interviewer, is that you'll know who is interviewing you. And so it's absolutely imperative for you to not only research the company, but your interviewer. So how would you do that? Those dot points here about web searching, and that's to do with anything about the company, any annual reports, anything that's recent, any news or anything along those lines. It would be a given that you know what the issues are around the potential organization that's going to be your future employer. The second thing would be about reports, which we've talked about. And what about LinkedIn? LinkedIn is a lot more current, a lot more fresh, particularly if an organization has people who are dedicatedly curating content that goes on about them. So you'll get an understanding about some of the stuff that's going on literally in the last 24 hours, but especially get to understand the background of your interviewer, how long they've been with their company, what's their role. Are they a line manager? Are they in HR? Are they talent acquisition? If it's a recruiter, what type of specializations are they, and so on and so forth. But it's very, very important for you to be able to do that prior research. I can't help but express this enough, and that is that the feedback I sometimes get from recruiters that we might partner with is that that person knew nothing about what the organization that they were going into, despite knowing that it was that organization. It's got to be a given that you do that. Okay, let's push on and talk about setting the scene. This is to do with this online content here, okay? And so I'm going to use Zoom as a catch-all phrase, like a vacuum cleaner can be called a Hoover, and a tissue can be called a Kleenex. I'll use Zoom, okay, as the catch-all. And setting the scene is you working things out beforehand. So definitely turn on, say, Zoom and check the background. Now, I've put up this for just because that's, you know, who we are. But you might want to check what's the background you've got. Is the light glaring? Check it out the day before, what it looks like. Move the computer around. Check the audio. Okay, now I'm using these headphones because I know that if I was to use these wonderful ones, then they're going to actually play up, although, and there's a potential because they're Bluetooth. I'd strongly recommend that you have something that's wired, plugged into your computer, and then you're checking those audio levels. Zoom will ask you whether you want to use the inbuilt or otherwise, and you can use, I'd definitely be using a wired one with that phone jack. Camera levels, this is a really tough one. I'm looking directly into the camera right there, I'm looking into the camera, but in fact, what I'm doing is my screen is here. So I am dropping my eyes constantly to get engagement with the person that I'm seeing, which is about there. And yet, as a human being, I'd be wanting to make sure I've got eye contact with somebody when I'm looking there. But it means I can't see what's actually going on the screen below. So it's that's my biggest challenge with anything on Zoom. Happens to be, I want to get the rapport there because that's actually how I get you to think that I'm looking at you, and I am. But really, I'm looking at you here, and the proverbial thing is I'm dropping my eyes. And I have to drop my eyes because in this context, I'm really wanting to see what the reaction is of you, say, if you were the interviewer, and you'd be wanting to do the same thing. It's a tough one. And no computer in experience for me so far has actually worked it. You can try and move the gallery view around. And on Zoom, for example, they do have different gallery views. And you can actually have the talker talking and you talking. You can have it along a line. It's not perfect, but the higher up you can actually get an image of the person with whom you're interacting, the more likely you're going to be close enough to getting rapport. But by and large, it's like this. It's really sucky in terms of an experience. Okay, let's have a look at the attire. Today, I'm a little bit more relaxed. I'm in my own work from home environment, but hey, I've got a shirt, collar, and although this is actually unbuttoned, a little bit more relaxed, what I'd be encouraging you to do is to find out from the website and also some prior background. It might be on Glassdoor, seek.com.au, calling up the company, getting in touch with the recruiter, but just trying to get an idea about what would be the appropriate attire for the interview. And so if it's a more formal place, let's call it a professional services outfit, then I'd wear an outfit that would be akin to what they normally would wear. If I was going for an interview like this into, say, a law firm that's more sort of white shirt and tie, there's no way I'm going to be presenting like this. Okay, just choose the attire that's appropriate and outfit accordingly. A virtual background versus none. I could turn on a virtual background, and I've had one done with the Career 365 logo. There are ones on Zoom with the Aurora Borealis, the San Francisco Gate and all the Golden Gate, and scenes from Earth and all that sort of stuff. That's cute, but it actually means that you get this shimmer around you, and it's a bit weird. I just get something plain. So I've got a curtain here. Use a background that isn't going to flare. So a plain background that doesn't flare whatsoever. Setting this in also is for those of you who have got kids, then I'd be encouraging them. What you do is you organise for the kids to be farmed out whilst you've actually got the interview going on, or let somebody else look after them so that you don't have anything distracting. But this medium is extremely forgiving. Actually, not this medium, this environment that we're in, this context we're in is very forgiving. And people realise that everybody's working from home, or a lot of people are working from home, especially if you're in transition. And so the whole idea is that what I've found is that people are very, very forgiving. There's a famous video that made it about probably in the last year of an expert being interviewed about their opinion, and in comes the little kid and disturbs them, and the housemaid grabs the kid, and it's just very funny. This guy was a high-end expert on world geopolitics, and even he had the problem with the kids coming in. So it's just about managing the kids. Setting the scene also is just as I said, it's a forgiving environment. Have a glass of water or something that can wet the whistle. I've got my tea here because you're going to be doing a lot of talking, but just have it to the side. Have also your questions on the side. No one can see that you've already written out some questions here. At an interview, they would, but you'll have some questions to the side, and I find that extremely helpful. Have a pen, because if you can write down some key points that are coming as a result of the interview, then that's great too. So at the moment, what I've got is I've got a blank piece of paper and a pen, and when things start to come up, I'm going to be writing those. With you. Writing those down so I can handle those. Okay, let's go through the technology. It's also a tough thing. Today I've had some problems apparently with the reception, and normally we get some fantastic reception. I've got 50 odd MIPS per second, and I'm on NBN, but it's somewhat patchy. You can't control it, but the expectation is that if you've tested it, you might have a better reception when you hotspot from your device to your computer versus otherwise, okay? So through Wi-Fi, whatever it is, just test it. What I mean by neighbours, well, I put on a webinar the other day, and the neighbours were drilling. I live in an apartment block, and neighbours were drilling. And I just wanted to let them know that there was a really important webinar coming up. Please, could they actually stop? So it's the whole idea is that if you know something's going to go on, just let people know that you've got a very important meeting if you can, and just manage your neighbours. What do I mean by co-dwellers off the net whilst the interview is on? Let's assume that you've got a broadband network, a Wi-Fi, whatever it is, okay, and you might actually have kids, or you might actually have anybody else that you might be flatting with, or sharing your place with, and they're going to be either downloading a heavy file to watch a movie, or they may be gaming. That's going to chew up a lot of your Wi-Fi. And I just ask that what you do is to prepare. Anything would be along the lines of just saying to people, look, between 1:15 and 2:15 on X day, I've got an interview. Just can I get you to help support me with that? Now, you might actually hear that there's noise outside. I can't control that. Again, it's forgiving, but somebody out there is actually, as if they've just heard this webinar, is actually making some drilling sounds. Can't control it, but if you can try and manage it beforehand, then great. Okay, let's have a look at these other things. Technology. I've got my computer plugged in right now, and when we started this, I was at 13%, which meant that if I was not going to be charging, I run the danger of my computer running out of juice. So I've got it charged in for this particular thing, and so should you. You should just make sure that you're charging, or it's fully charged ahead of your Zoom meeting, your Zoom interview. Other devices are off to avoid distractions. So what I've got here is I've got my computer on complete silence. And then you may, if you've got other people who are co-dwelling, put something on the door like a do not disturb sign, something along those lines, just to stop anybody coming into the room any adult coming into the room that can at least read a sign. Okay, next thing, practicing your interview. So we've talked about the camera angle, and so I'm now looking directly at the camera right there, and that's great for rapport, but I don't, again, have that same situation. I have to drop my eyes to be able to see the interviewer. Ideally, I want to repeat this again, say with Zoom, you can lift the level of the gallery view or whatever type of view you've got, so it's close enough to your camera so that your eye contact is close enough for you to be able to see what's going on with the people that you're interacting with. I want you to be able to think ahead of the interview, think of some questions, think what's likely to be. You worked out your logistics here, and then I want you to be able to rehearse. And the rehearsal is looking at the key things that your interviewer is most likely to be asking you. And so what does that mean? It means doing SEOs. And you may have seen from our modules, as well as a prior webinar or two that we've done on situation, action, outcome, a behavioral interviewing paradigm that we offer in our module bundles on interviewing. But SEO stands for situation, action, outcome, which is a nice, succinct model for you to be able to learn ahead of your interview. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. I'm not sitting backwards here, feeling a little lazy. By my own physiology, I'm upright. When I sit upright and on the edge of my seat, I'm feeling like whilst I'm relaxed, I'm straight spined. I'm not sleepy. I don't look like I'm slouching, but I'm able to feel like I'm engaged, and my body language suggests I'm more interested. It just happens to be I'm not leaning right forward, but I'm upright, and somehow or other, the brain, the way it's wired, means that I'm much more engaged with some things. You might think some of this stuff's a bit odd, but it actually works. Sit on the edge of your seat. I also find I meditate. Happy to share that with you. When I sit backwards, I'll fall asleep. When I sit on the edge of my seat, I get into a meditative situation. I don't fall asleep. So sitting on the edge of your seat's an important thing. And practice makes perfect. Trial with a friend, somebody who's low risk, whether it's family or friends or whatever it is. Just trial to do a Zoom meeting with one of your colleagues, or a friend, a family, whatever it is, that you can actually test all your setup, okay? All right, let's get on to the next thing. Communicating your value. Now, normally I'd be suggesting in any case at the interview to communicate your value, but in today's environment, because we've worked from home, the companies that want to know what you've done whilst you've worked from home. Past tense, WFHD, past tense. Okay, what did you do when you worked from home? For example, adaptability. Okay, how did you adapt to the environment? Flexibility. What can you demonstrate that how you were able to adapt to a work from home environment? What did you do? What behaviors, what experience can you bring around, for example, adaptability? Because the likelihood is that for at least a significant part of your next role, you're going to be working from home. Flexibility, similar thing. Or showing that you were a self-starter. What projects did you start? What did you learn during time? Maybe you were stood down for a while and you had to learn something or you chose to learn something during that particular time. Or in between jobs, what did you do? An example of that is that I know somebody very closely who was in between jobs, who chose to do a feng shui course. That's about energy flows within architecture, because they were an architect who had lost employment in between things. And so they ended up getting a diploma during COVID around that. So as an example, what could you actually do? Now, LinkedIn, for example, has a vast amount of learning courses that you could get into. And so it's great for you to be able to just peruse what those courses are. There's Udemy, there's Coursera, there's EDX, and a raft of other ones. At the end of the day, you want to be able to show that you've maybe improved your skills, your knowledge, and maybe even got a certificate that you can put onto LinkedIn demonstrating that. Other things about communicating your value would be how independent can you be working working from home, and as I suggested, what have you done since COVID? Volunteering. How did you volunteer? What did you do? Can you? I know some people, for example, have worked with training up with Lifeline, and so what they're doing is they're working from home to learn how to counsel other people who are going through some darker times with their mental health and so on and so forth. Whatever it is, it's communicating value over and beyond what an employer is interested in from you demonstrating those SEOs or the behavioural interviews. So communicating value. What is it you've done as a result of working from home, and what have you done as a result of having worked from home that you can further bring to an organisation? Okay, questions for the interviewer. I'm going to encourage that what you do is you go into your bundle of modules and you have a look at the modules that we provide, where we talk about a list of questions that you can ask at interview that will help you do your due diligence. We've got a list in there that'll help you at least kick that off. You might have a short list of questions that might be part of those, or some other ones that you might want to come up with. But at the end of the interview, please remember to ask, how did it go and what are the next steps? A lot of people forget to ask that. So how did it go? Again, difficulty about developing rapport with each other, but as you settle in, you'll find that it goes well, and it may become just natural to drop your eyes and to be looking at your interviewer like my eyes are now, as opposed to like this. But at the end of the day, you'll have of the interview, you'll have developed a rapport. Ask the question, how did it go? If there's an opportunity for you to continue to express something where you feel that an answer may have been not answered all that well, see if there's an opportunity to circle back to that, and then definitely try and find out what those next steps are. It may be that they're interviewing other people, may be that you get an idea about timing, where you are in the interview sequence. If they're interviewing 5, are you number 1? Are you number 5? Are you number 4? Where is that? What's the duration? When's the person who's doing the interviewing going to circle back to you? It could also be that a recruiter will promise to come back to you. Just find out what those next steps are. They're very powerful, so you're not left clueless about what the next steps are. Okay, and then after the interview, in order for you to be kept in their mind, I'd be recommending that you fire off an email or a text, and that you do find out what those next steps are. But how would you be kept in mind? It may be a thank you note. It may be also an article that you might see about the industry that you're going to go into, or about the organization, or about a topic that you were interviewed by. So you might, for example, have something to do with project management, and you may see something, maybe it's about logistics and supply, and that's big at the moment. And if you're going for a PMO type job, project management office type role, then it might be something that you handle where you can say, look, given the current situation, and given this is how one organization's handling it, or I thought of you along these lines, but keeping in touch. And I would recommend that ideally, if you could keep have the interviewer think about you beyond the interview by you contributing an article every now and again. Say over a 2-week period, do it every several days, just to keep in mind. It might be just once or twice over those 2 weeks, but whatever it is, it's keeping you in mind. Ideally, with a picture on your signature, so that they remember, that's what Greg looks like, or otherwise. Okay. All right, and then it's not about you on this webinar, what questions do you have for me, but in fact, it should be that that people actually have questions. It may be that you actually have some further questions. There may be something to clarify, and so on and so forth. But I would actually encourage that what you might have at this stage of today's webinar is indeed I'm starting to think about some questions. What are those next steps? I want to take you through that a little bit later, but why don't we actually go into the questions that I've just shared with you, or the content that I've just shared with you. What questions might come to mind? Barry says, not just kids, but pets, dogs. Very, very good point. What do you actually, what do you what would you do? Barry, have you handled that in the past? I'm just rather curious. Dogs, whilst I might be getting the response here, I know that when people are making films or advertisements, in a previous life, I used to be in marketing many moons ago. And I remember the advertising agency needing to use a dog and needing to use kids. And they said both of them are problematic. You never use kids and you never use dogs on advertisements, ideally. Well, it's the same thing with the kids and interviewing, but also having pets. Barry says, he had my son take him the dog for a walk. Excellent. Okay, that's a great point. Yeah, that's great. Both problems out of the house. Kids out of the house, the son took him for work. That's great. Does it matter between an open mic versus earplugs, asks Andrew. No, I don't think these are particularly intrusive, do you? And often I'm coaching you like this. It looks a bit weird maybe, and a guy with no hair, but I don't think it's a problem. But audio wise, is it an open mic versus earplugs? No, this is standard, and I would actually think it's much better that you actually have this. I'll share with you an experience that happened with me 2 weeks ago, and that was that I was on a webinar with two other experts, and I was third. The first guy was quite loud and he spoke through headphones. The second guy didn't, and he was sitting back like this. His computer's audio and microphone were over there, and then he spoke over time, but also the audio quality was going in and out, unbeknownst to him. It would have been much more controllable if he'd been over here, but with headphones. So a long answer, Andrew, is I think it's far better if you actually have these type of headphones. Any other questions you might have on this? Hoping the audio quality is still there, that you can hear me. Okay, with regards to eye contact, it's an interesting question. So thanks for that one. I really do want to emphasize it. I personally, I struggle with it. I'm looking at you right now, and I've spent a fair bit of time today talking about this, but most of the time it's going to be here. And haven't we all just experienced where people are like this? Or the content, so one is the camera. The other thing happens to actually be that I reckon the second most common phrase that people use with this type of technology is, can you still hear me, or can you hear me? So I'm going to circle back to Andrew's thing about does it matter between open mic and earplugs, whilst I've been asked that other question, and that is that you just don't want people to struggle with hearing you. It's hard enough to get an interview, isn't it? Let alone through this medium not to be heard of assertively or well enough. So if that leaves the other questions, I'm be encouraging what you do is have a look at the module side of things. Have a look at how to interview. Now, the modules will address the structure of an interview and the questions, but the takeouts from today would really be about practicing with a medium like this, checking your surroundings, making sure the technology works, and making sure that what you're doing is that you're really practicing not just about your answers, but about the medium. It's a hard one, this one. And if you'd like to hear more about some other tips, I'm more than happy to actually say that this is part one of other interview webinars that we'll be doing. We did do another webinar on interview technique, and as far as that's concerned, I'd be encouraging what you do is you have a look at those. You can get to see those in the Career 365 LinkedIn participant community. If you're not already a member of that, please apply. It's invitation only, but apply. And if you're part of the program, we can get you involved in that. I do have a question that's popped in late. Do you have any recommendations for reading your interviewer's body language through the screen? Yeah, look, great question. You can only get to see me from here, and that's an interesting thing, but you can't tell that I'm actually moving my legs up and down nervously. I only started that now, just to show you. You can't even see that I'm actually jumping them up and down, but I can. So body language is a tough one. Barry's answering that question by saying, that's a hard one. I recently had an example where I was lucky enough to have my interviewer sit back far enough for me to see his body language from the knees up. His choice, but good to see. It's interesting. It's a really interesting thing. Most of the time we're going to be seeing people from here up, which basically means we can't see the fidget. We can't see whether in fact we're boring people or otherwise. And that's where the presence that you require, that's required of you, has to be there, that you're present to the other person much more than if you were within a more natural environment, which is face-to-face. But good point, Barry. Thanks for that. That was an interesting one, I'm sure. Okay, if there's nothing else, then I would love to get your an email from you. Please go into that URL. Join the community if you haven't as yet, and participate in it as well. The more we've got in there, the better it is for everybody's experience. And please reach out to book in a coaching session. That's where we can help you. We can help you specifically about any issues that you've got. But I want to thank you very much for your time, and I've enjoyed talking about that. I'm looking at you directly there. And but I'm used to looking, and I've been reading my PowerPoint presentation below. Hopefully, whilst I've struggled with developing potential rapport with you with my eyes dropped down there, you still got a lot of value and engagement from me. I wish you well. I look forward to an email from you or any other form of engagement, and I wish you keeping safe well during these times, and best of luck.